those foreign contacts, those family members, those people that you were going to visit that you probably should have self-reported already. If you haven't yet, guess what? Now they're family members. So you definitely have a close or continuing relationship with those family members if you're seeing them, if you're visiting them, things of that nature. So you just kind of move up the line and, the spotlight gets a little brighter and, they're going to start looking into some of those relationships that you might form and responsibilities that might come with being married.
Welcome to Security Cleared Jobs, Who's Hiring and How, the podcast for cleared professionals looking for new opportunities and career advice.
Hey everybody, this is Bob with ClearedJobs.Net. Welcome to Security Cleared Jobs, Who's Hiring and How. We're going to be talking love and clearances with Tony Kuhn from Tully Rinckey. Tony's an Army veteran, a reservist, and he brings lots of practical insight to people who have security clearances. And we're going to be talking a little bit about relationships. How you doing, Tony?
I'm great, Bob. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, man, welcome back. This is my first time talking to you, but I know you've been on the podcast before, and I know you get some great reviews, and you always have some great information. So like I said, we're talking about things like dating and marriage and divorce and that kind of stuff, and how that can actually affect your clearances, because it really, really can. So let's just kick it off first with, dating. If you're a cleared professional, what kind of things should you be paying attention to in the dating world?
So mostly habits, things that the individual you're dating is into. You don't want to get caught up in any type of criminal activity. Things like maybe you've both had too much to drink and you're out drinking and driving and you get pulled over and one or both of you might be charged. There could be things that involve drug use, especially in today's day and age where so many states now have claimed to have legalized marijuana, which we all know is actually federally illegal. You have to pay attention to drug habits and drug involvement and things because, again, if you have a run-in with law enforcement or that drug is found on your person or in your vehicle or in your home, you could run into some issues there with your clearance. And then also, especially with the current state we're in right now, you have to look at citizenship, foreign contacts, foreign preference, foreign influence. Does that individual have foreign assets or relationships, family members, people in other countries? Is that person a U.S. citizen and here in this country legally? So you have to look at all those different things, even if it's just dating, because as you develop that bond with that other individual, you might put yourself in a position where some of those things are reportable and you might have to distance yourself from that individual. Yeah,
I mean, that's a great point. But you did start to talk about long-term relationships. So let's say that, you've been dating somebody and now you're going to be with them for a little while. What kind of are there red flags that you would think, okay, before I take this nice person that I've been dating to, more of a longer term thing, what really should be like giving us issues?
Yeah, it's a similar question and a similar answer, but as that relationship strengthens and you're together longer, you have to add in a couple of other potential guideline violations as well. So just reiterating drug use, if you're getting into a serious relationship, things like marijuana possession, marijuana use, even investing. And again, that's something that might be a little further down the line, but marijuana is a big one that you have to pay attention to. The federal government doesn't recognize medicinal marijuana. Even if they were to reschedule marijuana, it would still be a prescription drug, and it would not be something that they would recognize for recreational purposes. So drug use is a big one. So, I'd reiterate drug use again. There are some other ones. We talked a little bit about citizenship and, foreign contacts, things of that nature. So the more you're around that individual, are you now having contact with foreign nationals aside from just the individual you're dating? Have you met family members who are foreign contacts? Are you traveling to another country with this individual to visit family members? Have you reported that travel? So all those things come into play here. And now, we broaden the issues a little bit. You start to look at things like finances. If you are going to be in a serious relationship with this individual, finances could become an issue down the road. You might buy a house together, or you might start cohabitating, things of that nature. Even if you're not married yet, finances could always become an issue when you're in a serious relationship like that. And then finally, one of the big ones that a lot of people don't consider is, especially again with the current environment, looking at guideline A concerns. So guideline A is allegiance to the United States. Is this person that you're spending a ton of time with now, are they involved in extremist organizations? Do they have an anti-government stance? Are there things on social media? Are they involved in certain groups that are opposed to government or advocating for violence against the government? The more you have yourself around individuals who are involved in those types of things, the more indicators the government will find and could potentially revoke your security clearance based just on guideline A.
Yeah, so I guess, when you think about it, you go from dating to long-term relationships. Now you are kind of associating with a friend group. It's that concentric circle of who you're dealing with, and who's associating with you does get bigger. There's no doubt about that. You've been walking us up the ladder. I mean, the natural next step is, hopefully if you're starting to date somebody and you get this long-term relationship, maybe they've cleared the wicket so far and you're like, let's pop the question, man. Let's get married. Are there other things to consider now that we weren't considering before, that now that we're talking about legally being married?
Yeah, there could be. You're now going to start maybe commingling finances. Maybe you'll have a joint bank account. You're going to create marital assets. What are those marital assets? Have you looked into that yet? Is this other person investing in marijuana? Even if it's just a retirement account, are they intentionally investing in marijuana? And if they are, then you are now taking part in the purchase and sale of marijuana, which will be an issue in your security clearance adjudications. So you want to try and put a stop to that if you're going to get married and you're going to start both commingling your finances, because if you don't, you could have your security clearance revoked based on criminal activity and based on drug involvement. So that's the big one that would be new, is, looking at investing and what is your partner involved in. Now you're married, so you're probably going to have more involvement in social media together. So we touched on guideline A concerns a little bit, but this might become more of an issue now, because now you're the spouse of the individual who might be advocating for violence against the government, or you're the spouse of the person who might be involved in an extremist organization. And you're getting married. So those foreign contacts, those family members, those people that you were going to visit that you probably should have self-reported already. If you haven't yet, guess what? Now they're family members. So you definitely have a close or continuing relationship with those family members if you're seeing them, if you're visiting them, if you're communicating with them in any way, if they're friends on social media now, things of that nature. So you just kind of move up the line, and the spotlight gets a little brighter, and they're going to start looking into some of those relationships that you might form and responsibilities that might come with being married.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention
go ahead.
The marijuana thing, right? So we've talked about at a lower level, you don't want to be in the car that the marijuana is in. You don't want to have marijuana in your home. You don't want to deal with those types of things, because it could lead to arrests, or you being determined to have been in possession of marijuana or involved in sales and purchase of marijuana. When you get to marriage, the spouse who uses marijuana, even if it's prescription marijuana, is now in your home, living with you. That's your home, and there are drugs in your home as far as the federal government is concerned. So the government doesn't want to hear that it's prescribed. The government doesn't want you as a security clearance holder to have illegal drugs in your home. So you're going to have to work that out, and maybe work with your spouse to have them seek some type of alternative treatment, or completely stop using any type of recreational marijuana or other drug.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about now, are there special things to consider if both people in a marriage or even in a relationship are cleared? If there's both people have got clearances, what should we be thinking about if we've got a family of cleared folks?
All the same guidelines apply, obviously. They just, again, the spotlight's brighter. They're going to look a little closer, because you're both going to be investigated for that security clearance. And you should both understand that things like foreign contacts and drug use and those types of things are not permitted if you hold a security clearance, or it could be an issue if you hold a security clearance. But you just both have to pay a little closer attention, because you're both actually the one being investigated and working through the adjudication process for the clearance.
What if they've got two? What if the clearance levels are different, in the sense that, like, one spouse says, I'm very hyper vigilant about myself. I'm going to report everything that could be, because I've got maybe a polygraph level clearance. And then the other person in that relationship, maybe they've only got a secret or a top secret. So they go, I don't think this means anything. It's not that big a deal. What happens if one person reports it to their FSO, but the other one doesn't? Do they talk it to those things, or how does that work?
Well, the FSOs won't really talk to each other, but the answer is it depends. So it is possible that the spouses have different levels of security clearance. The easy answer is that the adjudicative guidelines are the adjudicative guidelines. Regardless of your level of clearance, all of those guidelines should apply equally. We all know they probably don't, right? They're going to dig a little closer. Maybe you'll have a polygraph at a higher level clearance. Even the position might require a polygraph. So, one of the spouses might actually be going through a tougher investigation than the other spouse would have. But the adjudicative guidelines are the same. If a spouse were to self-report something and the other spouse doesn't, then I think it would depend on what they self-reported. Was it actually reportable? Was it something that only applied to the one spouse and really didn't involve the other spouse? And if it was an issue that involved both spouses, then that spouse who's not self-reporting actually is breaching their duty to self-report. The easiest way the government could revoke that clearance is under a guideline E violation for personal conduct for intentionally omitting information from the government or not fully cooperating with an investigation. So there's a possibility that it could cost the second spouse their security clearance.
Yeah. So it sounds like a good relationship with your FSO is a good thing. So if you can ask those questions ahead of time is probably the best advice.
Yeah, questions, but not self-reporting verbally.
Yeah.
You want to avoid that and be careful about how you self-report.
Be careful about how you ask the question to your FSO is what you're saying.
Yeah, because if you stumble into something, then the FSO is going to find their beliefs and their life, their values, their life experience. They'll interpret whatever you're asking them, based on their life experience, and it could cause some issues for you.
You can't just say asking for a friend and then go off.
You could. You have to be careful about how you do it.
We were talking about marriages and things like that, but not every marriage, unfortunately, works out. And sometimes divorces can be nice and easy. Sometimes divorces can be not so easy. What kind of things should the people think about if they've got clearances that are involved in a divorce? I mean, I got to imagine the easy ones would still be kind of complicated with a clearance, but I can imagine that the not so easy ones could be really, really painfully messy.
Yeah. You have the obvious issues that come up. Is the spouse vindictive? Is it a nasty breakup? If so, they could just cause all kinds of problems, get an order of protection, complain to law enforcement, cause all kinds of problems. Some of that's nefarious. Some of that's just what bitter spouses may do to each other during a divorce. But the thing that you really have to consider and be really careful about going into the divorce is finances. Finances over and over again. That's the number one issue, because before the divorce, you had marital assets. You were both probably contributing and paying those bills together. And now that income is going to be gone. That other half of the income that was being used to pay those bills and to keep you out of debt is going to be gone. So who's going to pick up the debt? Which spouse is going to pick up the debt? Which spouse is going to pay the debt? Can you afford to keep the house? Is the house going to be foreclosed on? There's a bunch of different considerations when you're looking at finances. But what you need to know is that you need to act responsibly given the circumstances. There's always ways that you can mitigate, most of the time anyway, there's ways that you can mitigate the government's concerns. And the way that you can mitigate the government's concerns when it comes to finances is to act responsibly given the circumstances and be transparent. If you're falling 3 or 4 months behind on credit card payments, revolving debt, things of that nature, talk to your FSO. A good, well-written self-report explaining those things and mitigating the concerns is the best way to do that. Make sure that you're reporting if your house goes into foreclosure or certain things like that. And if you're going to have to file for bankruptcy protection, make sure that you self-report that as well. Filing for bankruptcy protection is not going to result in an automatic revocation of a person's security clearance. People worry about that all the time. I've represented many people who have filed for bankruptcy protection and helped them keep their security clearances. The question is, when you filed for bankruptcy protection, were you doing the thing that the government would consider to be responsible given the circumstances? And sometimes it's the responsible thing to do because you just can't pay the debt. But in seeking bankruptcy protection, you're taking accountability, you're doing the right thing, you're doing the mature, responsible thing, and you're trying to resolve those debts.
What about, when you're talking about divorce, sometimes a divorce can take a while. If once you get into that part where in some states, you got to be separated for a year, type thing.
Yeah.
Is a cleared person still kind of on the hook for some of those actions that their separated spouse could be doing? Yeah. We talked about with dating and long-term dating. Is it kind of still the same if they decide to go off the deep end, or are we on the hook for that?
It depends. You're right. Some divorces take years, especially if it's a contentious divorce. It could take years. If it's an amicable divorce, you might have a separation agreement in place early, but it could still take a year to get the divorce. But get a really good separation agreement drafted, and that would outline everything about the financial assets, who's responsible for what. And then that way, if your spouse is responsible for something and they fail to keep up with their responsibilities, that creditor might still come back to you because technically it's a marital asset still because the divorce isn't final. But that's really good mitigation if your security clearance is at risk. You can say, look, this isn't my responsibility. This is a legally binding separation agreement. It's a contract. My spouse just didn't comply with their portion of the separation agreement. Now, on the other side, the divorce could take 3 years, 4 years. If that happens, again, do the responsible thing given the circumstances, do your best to keep up on the finances, and just be able to mitigate or explain any issue that put you in the situation you're in now. Make sure that you can explain that if you ever have to adjudicate to keep the clearance.
Yeah. Other than finances, what about the like foreign contacts or drug use and stuff? If the separated spouse is doing those things, and just are we still could that still come back to haunt a cleared person if their separated spouse
if you
decides?
If you cohabit,
if you're still
yeah, if you cohabitate, you live with someone who has contact with foreign nationals, people who aren't U.S. citizens, they have closer continuing contact with those individuals. If you cohabitate with someone who's using drugs, all of those things could still be an issue because you cohabitate with those individuals. The best way to deal with that situation would be to, again, draft a well-written self-report. Don't do it verbally. Yeah. I've talked about that a couple of times now. A lot of people don't understand what happens when you verbally self-report. If you verbally self-report, you're talking to an individual who's going to assign, their opinion of what you're telling them based on their life experience. And if you're talking to them about marijuana use, maybe they think marijuana is the devil and they've never used marijuana and would never use marijuana, and you're a drug addict. Well, guess what? You're telling them your self-report. They have to create notes and pass things up the chain. You don't want them to pass up their interpretation of your self-report. If you self-report that you got a DWI, maybe that FSO had a family member that was killed by a drunk driver. Guess what? That self-report is going to be really nasty by the time it gets worked up the channels. So your best bet is to do a really well-written self-report or legal brief. And in that, you get to control the narrative. You get to add in a whole bunch of mitigation and explain away any of the government's concerns before they have any, and hopefully mitigate the government's concerns, and you might not even get a statement of reasons or have your clearance revoked. As long as you submit a really well-written self-report with built-in mitigation, you get an opportunity to present those facts in the light most favorable to you. Don't do it verbally.
Yeah, good advice. These are situations that, we've talked about recently. We hope nobody's ever in divorce, that kind of stuff. But if you find yourself in these situations, man, you need this good advice. You definitely need to have some good advice and some good counsel to make sure that you don't end up making matters even worse.
Yeah, a little bit of work up front could save you a ton of time, stress, money, down the road. It only gets harder. And then if you do something like create a really bad record early in the case, it's going to be more difficult to win your case down the road. So the best bet is to, do a really good job up front, take it seriously, and do your best to mitigate the concerns at the earliest possible stage. Otherwise, it could create a whole bunch of work down the line.
All right. Well, hey, Tony, thanks a lot for all this stuff today, man. You always bring good information, and we're always loving to talk to you. So thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I look forward to the next one.
Yeah. Hey, that was a really great conversation we just had with Tony. I tell you what, he has a lot of stuff to talk about. And the things that I really picked up out of that is all those different reporting requirements and the different stages too of your relationships, that you're always thinking about things because you're dating, you're marrying, you're possibly divorcing, real people with real other things in your background, and that can affect your security clearance. And so again, love talking to Tony. He's a great guy. We learned a lot today. If you like this kind of content, if you like following ClearedJobs.net and the Security Cleared Jobs podcast, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, give us a review. We're here all the time bringing you new and cool information.